They were told it was impossible. A software company trying to beat PlayStation? Even Bill Gates laughed at the idea until one night in 1999. A group of engineers stormed into his office with a black box and a dangerous dream. We can build the console that kills Sony. He stared at them for a long moment. Not the kind of long pause that means doubt, but the kind that weighs possibility. The engineers standing before him were nervous, clutching diagrams, prototypes, and dreams that most people at Microsoft thought were insane. A gaming console? From us? The company that built Windows. The system that crashed every other Tuesday? They were programmers, not rock stars. They weren't supposed to compete with the sleek, stylish, pop culture empire that was Sony. But something in their eyes made Bill Gates pause. It wasn't arrogance. It was conviction. The same kind of conviction that had built Microsoft in the first place. They weren't just pitching a machine. They were pitching a war. And finally, after that silence stretched into something electric, he leaned forward and said just 3 words. All right, prove it. Those words hit the room like a spark in dry grass. Because in that instant, what had been a half-crazy dream became an official mission. It wasn't about games anymore. It was about power. It was about pride. It was about rewriting the rules of an industry that had already crowned its king. And that moment, quiet, almost invisible, lit the fuse on one of the most secret, ruthless, and fascinating wars in modern tech history. A war not fought with tanks or soldiers, but with ideas. A war where marketing campaigns were missiles and innovation was ammunition, where every design choice, every press release, every product reveal was a move on a battlefield the public didn't even know existed. It was a war fought through living rooms, through the hearts of teenagers, through the glow of a TV screen at 2 a.m. And the goal wasn't destruction. It was domination, to decide whose world people would live in when they press start. Because behind the shiny console launches and the commercials filled with explosions and laughter, something far bigger was happening. This wasn't just about who made better games. It was about who owned the future. Microsoft saw something no one else was willing to admit. That video games weren't child's play anymore. They were the gateway to something far more powerful. Control the home. The living room, that sacred space between work and sleep, was becoming the next digital frontier. Whoever owned the screen in that room would soon own the ecosystem around it. And Sony, with their PlayStation, had already moved in first. PlayStation wasn't just a console. It was a lifestyle. It spoke to identity, rebellion, freedom, the idea that technology could be cool. Kids were growing up with the Sony logo burned into their memories. They weren't just playing games. They were pledging allegiance. To Microsoft, that was terrifying. Because while everyone else was looking at sales numbers, Microsoft was looking at patterns. Where people spent their time, how they consumed media, and what brand they trusted. And what they saw was clear. Sony wasn't just selling entertainment. They were shaping behavior. Every controller click, every late-night gaming session, every hour spent staring at a PlayStation screen meant something more. It meant time not spent on Windows. It meant loyalty slowly drifting away from Microsoft's world. To the engineers who pitched the Xbox, this wasn't a gaming problem. It was a survival problem. Because once Sony controlled the living room, they controlled the pipeline to everything that followed. Movies, music, streaming, even computing. PlayStation wasn't just a machine. It was a Trojan horse. And that realization hit Microsoft like a gut punch. They'd missed the internet revolution once, letting Google and others claim the web. They weren't going to miss the entertainment revolution too. So those 3 words, all right, prove it, became a rallying cry. Inside Microsoft, teams began working in secret labs, hacking together prototypes with old PC parts, custom chips, and pure desperation. They called it the DirectX box, named after software used to make PC games. Later, it would be shortened to something simple, something bold, Xbox. But what it really represented was something deeper. Microsoft's declaration of war. This wasn't just another product launch. This was an invasion, a move into enemy territory, a message to Sony, to gamers, and to the entire tech industry that Microsoft wasn't content being the software company that powered your work life. They wanted to own your play life too. And from that moment on, everything changed. Because what started as a small group of engineers trying to build a console would spiral into a 20-year conflict fueled by ego, innovation, and billions of dollars. A war that would define generations, change entire industries, and blur the lines between technology and identity. A war not fought with weapons, but with marketing campaigns, hardware chips, and the psychology of human attention. Because when you strip it all down, the games, the gadgets, the graphics, there's only one thing every tech giant truly wants. Control. Control of how we spend our time. Control of what we pay attention to. Control of what we feel loyalty toward. And that war, quiet, relentless, and invisible, had just begun. Back then, Sony wasn't just a company. It was a movement. They didn't sell consoles. They sold identity. When you held a PlayStation controller, it felt like holding a piece of the future. Sleek, rebellious, untouchable. It wasn't about polygons or processing power. It was about status. PlayStation had already conquered the world. It lived in every teenager's bedroom, every dorm room, every late-night living room. It was a heartbeat of an entire generation that grew up chasing high scores and digital adventures. Kids bragged about having won. Adults justified it as a family entertainment system. But deep down, everyone knew what it really was. Freedom in a box. Sony had achieved what few brands ever could. They made technology emotional. Every startup wanted to be like them. Every developer wanted to work for them. And every competitor wanted to find a way to stop them. Because the PlayStation wasn't just a console. It was cool incarnate. From the electric startup sound to the spinning disc. It became a sensory symbol of belonging. Owning one wasn't just about gaming. It meant being part of the future. In living rooms across the world, that gray box sat proudly beside television sets, glowing like a crown jewel. It played more than games. It played culture. The ads were cinematic. The music was hypnotic. The attitude was loud, confident, and young. PlayStation represented everything Microsoft wasn't. Meanwhile, in Redmond, Washington, Microsoft lived in an entirely different world. Their world was beige desktops, tangled wires, spreadsheets, and system errors. They powered the world's offices, but never its imaginations. They were the brand people needed, not the one anyone loved. Microsoft was logic. Sony was emotion. And that difference made all the difference. Microsoft dominated the workday. But the moment people went home, Sony took over their nights. Families didn't gather around Excel. They gathered around PlayStation. And for a company obsessed with control, that was a nightmare in disguise. Because deep inside Microsoft's sprawling Redmond campus, a few engineers began to notice something strange. They realized Sony wasn't just selling fun. They were building habits. Every time a kid turned on their PlayStation, they were entering Sony's world. One where Sony controlled the music, the movies, the games, even hardware. And while it looked harmless on the surface, to Microsoft, it was terrifying. Sony had quietly created a self-contained ecosystem years before that word became trendy. Through one device, they were training an entire generation to live, breathe, and spend inside Sony's orbit. Every product connected to the next. Every innovation locked you a little deeper into their world. It wasn't just gaming anymore, it was ownership of attention. And if that pattern continued, Sony wouldn't just win the console war, they'd win the home, the living room, the sacred space where technology meets comfort, was becoming the new battleground. And Sony was fortifying it fast. DVD players, stereos, televisions, all wearing the same proud logo, all whispering the same message. PlayStation is the center of your world. That realization shook Microsoft to its core. Because if Sony captured that space, they control the future of entertainment. And eventually, the future of computing itself. Microsoft's empire had been built on desktops. But desktops were fading into background, while living rooms, the place where people relaxed, connected, and consumed, were becoming the next digital frontier. And Sony was already there, waiting, smiling. To most of the world, it looked like a natural evolution, a gaming company expanding into entertainment. But to Microsoft, it looked like something much more dangerous, an invasion. If they didn't act fast, they wouldn't just lose a market, they'd lose relevance. So behind closed doors, whispers began to spread inside Microsoft hallways. Whispers that maybe, just maybe, they had to fight fire with fire. Maybe it was time to stop being the company people needed at work and start being the company people wanted at home. Because if Sony owned the living room, Microsoft's kingdom, the PC, the office, the entire foundation to power would slowly crumble. And that's when it hit them. Sony wasn't just winning, they were training the world, one PlayStation at a time. If that continued unchecked, the future of entertainment, and maybe even computing, would belong entirely to Sony. Not because they had better technology, but because they had done something far more powerful. They had captured loyalty. And loyalty, once earned, is almost impossible to take back. So Microsoft built a weapon, one designed not to copy Sony, but to outthink them. And that weapon had a name that would eventually redefine gaming itself. The Xbox. When it launched in 2001, most people laughed. It looked bulky. It was green and strange. It came from the same company that made Excel and PowerPoint. Sony fans called it a PC in disguise. And to be fair, it was. But inside that strange black box was something revolutionary. Not a console, but a concept. See, Sony was selling you a machine. Microsoft was selling you a future. The PlayStation 2 was already miles ahead. Cheaper, sleeker, backed by an Empire Studios, and loaded with games that defined a generation. It had charisma, the kind that makes kids beg their parents at Christmas. Microsoft couldn't compete with that charm, at least not on the surface. So instead of fighting Sony's present, they built for the future. Because while Sony was obsessed with selling discs, tangible, physical products that lived in stores, Microsoft was studying something deeper, something invisible, connection. They realized that gaming wasn't just about graphics or storylines. It was about people, about how humans crave community, competition, teamwork, shared emotion. So they built something no one had dared before. Xbox Live. At first, it was just a tiny idea. What if every Xbox could talk to every other Xbox? But that small idea would go on to change entertainment forever. For the first time, players weren't alone. You could jump into a game and instantly find friends across oceans, talk in real time, form teams, build rivalries. It was gaming reimagined, alive, social, electric. And this wasn't just innovation, it was strategy. While Sony was focused on what people were buying, Microsoft focused on how they were connecting, because connection meant data. Data meant personalization, and personalization meant loyalty, the most powerful currency in the modern tech war. The Xbox became a kind of Trojan horse. It wasn't there to win console sales. It was there to quietly teach people to live online, to get comfortable with logging in, creating accounts, saving data in cloud, all things that would later power Microsoft's greatest advantage. Meanwhile, Sony laughed until they realized something terrifying. Microsoft wasn't building a gaming company. They were building an ecosystem. They weren't fighting to own your console. They were fighting to own your time. And every hour you spent talking, playing, and connecting through Xbox Live wasn't just a game session. It was another brick in Microsoft's invisible empire. Because for them, gaming was just the beginning. The true goal? To build a network so powerful that every screen, every device, every login would eventually connect back to Microsoft. Sony had the fans, but Microsoft had the infrastructure. And in the long run, infrastructure always wins. Still, no one could see that yet. To the world, Sony was still king. But deep in Redmond, behind those glowing monitors and late-night meetings, Microsoft's engineers knew the war had already begun. Not for consoles, not for games, but for something much bigger. The invisible fabric that would define how humans interact, play, and live in the digital age. And with every new player who joined Xbox Live, that future was quietly becoming reality. They weren't just building a gaming platform. They were building a new kind of world, one login at a time. At first, people mocked it. Online gaming? On a console? It sounded ridiculous. Internet connections were slow. Broadband was rare. Most people still thought multiplayer meant passing a second controller to your friend sitting next to you. Critics called Xbox Live a gimmick. laggy, expensive, pointless, they said. And for a while, they were right. Connections dropped, servers failed. Voice chats sounded like they were coming from outer space. But while everyone laughed, Microsoft didn't flinch, because they weren't trying to win that moment. They were building something far bigger. They were building the future. A future where gaming wouldn't be about which console had the best graphics or the most exclusive titles. It would be about who owned the players themselves. See, every gamer who created an Xbox Live account wasn't just signing up to play. They were signing into Microsoft's world, handing over data, habits, preferences, and most importantly, loyalty. To the average person, it looked harmless. Just a username, a friend list, maybe a few messages. But to Microsoft, it was gold, because behind every gamer tag was a digital identity, a new node in their growing network. And in the 21st century, data is power. Sony was still chasing discs and console sales. Microsoft was quietly collecting something infinitely more valuable: insight. They knew what you played, when you played, and even who you played with. They didn't just want to sell you games. They wanted to understand you. So while Sony was celebrating hardware numbers, Microsoft was mapping human behavior, predicting trends, studying connection patterns, learning how players move through digital worlds. And then, in 2005, they struck. Hard, fast, and a full year before Sony could respond. The Xbox 360 hit the market like a thunderclap. Sleek design, lightning-fast performance, and most importantly, it was built around Xbox Live from the ground up. This wasn't a console that could go online. It was a console made for the online world. Gamers could compete globally, download new content instantly, and share achievements. Things Sony was still treating like side features. And suddenly, the narrative flipped. Microsoft, the office company, the corporate brand, the outsider, was now setting the standard for modern gaming. Their console wasn't just faster. It was smarter. It learned. It connected. It evolved. The Xbox 360 wasn't just entertainment. It was a social experience, a digital ecosystem that turned gaming into something communal, alive, and addictive. Sony, once untouchable, suddenly looked slow, like a giant waking up to realize the world had changed overnight. Because in this new era, it wasn't about hardware specs anymore. It was about who could build a universe players never wanted to leave. And by the time Sony finally caught up, Microsoft had already built one. For the first time ever, Sony looked slow, and that terrified them, because this wasn't supposed to happen. They were the kings of gaming, the pioneers who had turned a black plastic box into a symbol of cool rebellion and culture. But suddenly, the world was talking about Xbox. Microsoft, the company that made spreadsheets, had done the unthinkable. They didn't just launch a console. They changed what gaming meant. They made it social. They made it alive. And for the first time, people started asking a dangerous question. Why does PlayStation feel lonely? That single question hit Sony where it hurt most: their identity. Because PlayStation wasn't just a console, it was a lifestyle. Kids grew up with it. Teenagers bragged about it. Adults still called it the real gamer's choice. It was a badge of honor. But Microsoft flipped the game by shifting the conversation entirely. They made gaming less about what you owned and more about who you belonged with. You didn't just play Halo. You played with your friends. You didn't just beat a level. You shared it, streamed it, lived it together. And that community became powerful. Because communities don't just buy products, they defend them. Fans started fighting online wars in comment sections, defending Xbox like it was a belief system. PlayStation had loyal customers. Xbox had a tribe. Sony felt the ground shifting beneath them. They still had exclusives: God of War, Uncharted, Gran Turismo, cinematic, beautiful, polished. They still had the power, the brand, the legacy, but they were losing something far more important: momentum. Microsoft was no longer just selling consoles. They were building habits. Because habits are invisible chains, the kind people don't even realize they're wearing. You log in Xbox Live every day because your friends are there. You renew your subscription because your data, your achievements, your identity live inside that ecosystem. And that's when Sony finally understood. Microsoft wasn't in the console business anymore. They were in the habit business, the ecosystem business, the data business. So Sony did what great companies do when they're cornered. They evolved. They took a long look at Microsoft's strategy, the networks, the servers, the cloud systems, and realized they couldn't outcode them, but they could outfield them. They shifted focus. They leaned into what no algorithm could ever replicate. Emotion. Emotion in stories. Emotion in gameplay. Emotion in the way players felt when they held that controller. Because while Microsoft was teaching people how to connect, Sony was reminding them why they played in the first place. And that pivot, quiet, subtle, and deeply human, would spark the next phase of the secret war. A war no longer about who had the most powerful machine, but who could touch the human heart more deeply. They focus on stories. Games that didn't just entertain, but moved people. The Last of Us, God of War, Uncharted, each one cinematic. Heartfelt, human. Sony realized you can't outdate a Microsoft, but you can outfeel them. And it worked. The PlayStation 4 became a phenomenon, elegant, emotional, and deeply personal. It wasn't just a console anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder that people don't fall in love with platforms. They fall in love with experiences. For a while, Sony had the world again. But while everyone celebrated the PS4's success, Microsoft was quietly shifting the battlefield again. Then Microsoft made their boldest move yet. They launched Game Pass, a simple idea with world-shifting consequences, a Netflix for games. At first, people didn't get it. Why would anyone subscribe to games instead of buying them? Owning your favorite titles, collecting them on a shelf, that was part of the culture, but that was exactly the point. Microsoft wasn't trying to win with culture, they were trying to change it, because Game Pass didn't just offer games. It redefined what ownership meant. You didn't need to buy discs or downloads anymore. You just access them. Any game, any device, anytime, one monthly fee. And suddenly the walls between consoles, PCs, and even mobile screens began to fade. The Xbox wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a portal. And that portal could live anywhere. On your phone, your laptop, your smart TV. The console was no longer the hero. The network was. While Sony was still pouring it hard into perfecting exclusives, breathtaking cinematic experiences like The Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima, Microsoft was quietly playing a different game. They weren't building consoles anymore. They were building infrastructure. They bought entire studios, Bethesda, Activision Blizzard, Obsidian, not just for their games, but for their universes. They expanded their cloud servers, strengthened their AI tools, and made Game Pass the backbone of a new kind of entertainment system. Sony was still crafting masterpieces. Microsoft was crafting a matrix because they realized something deeper. The future of gaming isn't about hardware. It's about access. And whoever controls access controls everything. With Game Pass, Microsoft made a quiet but world-altering statement. You don't need to own your games. You just need to belong to our ecosystem. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it changed the entire psychology of gaming. Players no longer thought about consoles. They thought about libraries. They didn't buy products. They subscribed to a lifestyle. And that's when the real war began. Not for devices, but for ecosystems. Because now, the question wasn't who's better graphics or who runs faster. It was something far more powerful. Who controls experience? And the answer split the world in two. Sony, the company that owned the heart. Microsoft, the company that owned the habit. Sony was emotion, artistry, immersion. Microsoft was structure, connection, and convenience. One moved your soul. The other trained your routine. And in this silent war for the future of gaming, one truth became clear. It's no longer about who makes the best console. It's about who builds a world we live inside. Without even realizing it, one fights for your emotion, the other fights for your attention. And in the middle of it all is you, the gamer, the creator, the consumer, the real battlefield. Microsoft doesn't care if you play on a console or a phone, as long as it's through their cloud. Sony doesn't care if you buy their hardware, as long as you love their stories enough to stay. This is no longer a war of sales. It's a war of psychology, a war of retention. Because the longer you stay, the less likely you are to leave. That's the secret every tech giant learns sooner or later. Not how to get your attention, but how to keep it. Not how to win the moment, but how to own the habit. And that's the hidden truth behind every modern tech war. The smartest companies don't fight for dominance today. They fight for dependency tomorrow. Microsoft understood that before anyone else. They didn't just build platforms, they built patterns. They made connection effortless, progress measurable, and community addictive. You can just use Xbox Live. You live there. Achievements, friends, data, all of it tied to your digital self. And that's what made leaving so hard. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't want to. Meanwhile, Sony mastered something different, something older, more human. They didn't just make you play, they made you feel. Every story-driven exclusive, every cinematic masterpiece, every controller vibration timed perfectly with a moment of heartbreak. It wasn't just entertainment, it was emotion engineering. Sony didn't need your data, they needed your devotion, and they earned it one emotional story at a time. So while Microsoft mastered control, Sony mastered connection, different weapons, same goal, because both weren't just shaping how you play. They were shaping who you are when you play. Microsoft built your digital routine. Sony built your emotional memory. And somewhere in between, both quietly mastered you. Because in the end, this was never really about who had the better console. It was about who could shape your behavior, who could design your attention, who could make you keep coming back. Not out of obligation, but out of instinct. And that's the game underneath all the games. The invisible war you're part of every time you log in, subscribe, or press continue. So now, I want to hear from you. Which side do you think is really winning? The empire of control or the empire of emotion? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story opened your eyes to just how deep the Microsoft-Sony rivalry really goes, hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves tech stories. And subscribe for more untold truths behind the biggest brands. Because the next great tech war won't be fought with processors, graphics cards, or exclusives. It won't be fought over consoles at all. It'll be fought over you, your time, your loyalty, your mind. And the scariest part? That war has already begun.